Welcome everyone to today's podcast, Transition into a director role. I am super excited to be here with you. This is a place where we change how we think about change and discover that we are more skilled, experienced, and capable of managing any change because we have lived through lots of transitions that got us where we are today. And through these transitions, we learned about ourselves, our strengths, gained confidence, and grew resilient to whatever life threw at us. Well, today I have my awesome friend and guest here, Neil. Neil, welcome to the podcast.
Wonderful to be here, Andrea.
Before we start, tell us a little bit about you.
I like Coca-Cola. No,
That was
seriously
like
though.
a commercial. I loved it.
No, seriously though. So, this year actually marks 25 years in my career. So I started working at the very young age of 19 back in, I believe it was 1999 or 2000, somewhere around that time. And my first job was in software engineering. And then I went to, more advanced technology jobs beyond that and managed to learn a lot about the domain of IT through the work I was doing. Um, it's a little scary to me because I don't feel like I've been working for 25 years. I still kind of feel young. um, but it's been a very eventful career, and in that time I've learned a great deal from success and failure. I know a lot of people say, you learn the most in your career through failing at things, and that's not wrong. You do. But you also learn through achieving things and being successful at things. And so I'd love to share more of that with your audience today. And yeah, any other questions?
Well, well, let's jump right in. But first, let's start because today we're here to find out more about when you took this pivotal step of becoming a leader of leaders, aka director role. So, was this always part of your career development plan, or were you invited in the role by someone? How did you get in there?
I was invited into the role. So I like to put positions into context because positions are different in different places around the world. Um, I'm originally from New Zealand. I spent 33 years of my life living, educating, and being with my family in New Zealand before I moved to the United States. So that was a transition for me, just culturally coming to a different country, learning the system. And in New Zealand, for example, if you start a business, the official title at the very top is CEO or director of a business. So it's a much higher level role or a much higher level title in a lot of cases for companies in New Zealand. But when you come to the United States, there are so many different titles that companies use in different companies where director can be middle management or something completely different from what I expected. So when I sort of landed my role in economic development about 6 years ago as a director of technology, I was invited into that role because of my past experience of working in technology. So it was my domain expertise in technology that enabled me to get the offer. But I didn't actually go for that role. In fact, I didn't even know that job existed. I got the job, interestingly enough, back then by holding a small conference here in Cleveland where I invited 50 companies to come and attend and learn about digital transformation. And so, as I invited all these companies, someone in the audience was from the economic development background, and they started to speak with me after the conference about having a role as director of technology, and they said, well, we have a job available. Is this something, are these conferences something you do full time, or is this, would you be interested in the job? And as I was living here and I was looking for something more permanent, I sort of looked at the offer and I said, this is, yeah, sure, I'll try it out. And the interesting thing for me was, I had no experience in that type of work. In economic development, I knew nothing about it. So people will say, people might look at me with bias and think, "Oh, you got lucky with that," and that's fair. It's not wrong to say that,
Oh yeah,
but
we
what
use
they
biases all the time, Neil. So let's
yeah.
just put it on the
So
table.
people might say I got lucky with that, but the reality is what they were looking for was not somebody who had experience in economic development. They were looking for somebody who had experience in
Tech.
technology.
Yeah.
And so when I came into that role, I came in with a technology background and I was strong with my technology background. So they felt that I could have the conversations with technology companies that they needed to have as an ED organization. So I did bring the right kind of experience to the role that they were hiring for. And the interesting thing was that they had a lot of difficulty hiring for that role in that particular organization. They were looking for someone for 9 months and they couldn't find someone because they were looking for somebody with a technology background who could talk to people. And that's very, you're going to laugh and everybody laughs at this, but it's hard to find technology workers that can communicate with human beings in a way that human beings like to communicate. So,
It,
to, yeah.
it's that
Anyway,
connection point. It's that connection point. I speak often. Engineers are trained to communicate at level 4, but then when you want to talk to non-engineers, you have to go down to level 1 or 2. So that ability to go from level 4 to level 1 and level 2 is a skill. It's something that you train, you learn, and then you master.
yeah, and so I through my presenting and speaking engagements and things had learned how to communicate effectively at a level where the mainstream audience could understand what I was talking about when it came to technology. And that was part of the reason I got the job offer. But more interestingly enough about that was they did not have a job description. And this seems to be a trend in my life at the moment where as I went into that role, the senior vice president at Neo, at Team Neo, wrote me an email on Friday and he said, why don't you come up with what you think the job is and send it to me and I'll look at it. And this was before the job offer came. So he kind of just sent me an email and said, tell me what you think we do. Right. And so on the Friday, he sent me this email and I wrote it up on the weekend. And on the Monday morning in his inbox, I had sent through an entirely written job description of what I thought that role would be. And then he came back to me and he said, well, this is better than the one we wrote. So we're offering you the job.
So Neil,
So,
take me back to that moment on Friday when you get that email. What were you feeling? Were you freaking out and you were excited at the same time?
well, I was working another job at the time. And it was weird because it was kind of like, it was a little bit frustrating. It was a smaller company. And so when I got the email, I got excited, because I was like, wow, that senior vice president guy I met at that conference really came back to me because he saw me on stage speaking and I didn't think he would. So when he responded back to me and we started just having that communication through email, um, and then he challenged me. I accepted the challenge. He said, can you come up with a description of what you feel this particular role would mean and what you would need to do? And so I did my due diligence because before you go into any opportunity, you have to understand whether or not you're capable of doing that job, right? That expectation's there. So
Yes.
I did my due diligence on the organization. I researched on what they did, who they worked with, who their partners were, what their goals were, what their mission was, and what their culture was. And then I took all of that, and this was, not in the days where you could punch all that into AI and it would give you an answer. That
Yeah,
didn't
no,
exist back
no,
then.
not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, this is still 6, 7 years ago. So I did my own due diligence and took that information and turned it into a format where I could then present my skills. And instead of sending a resume, I presented my skills in a job description, which I wrote for that organization, for
Tell me,
their
Neil, I'm
HR.
so curious. What was your mindset? Eh, because I'm trying to imagine myself, and I had opportunities like this where people gave me the kind of the free range of put
My,
put put something down. Were you going like I'm gonna go big, or I'm gonna put some restrictions and guidelines in? I'm curious. What were some of your
my
thoughts?
my initial mindset was what does a best practice or success look like if you're doing that kind of job? So what I ended up doing was investigating that kind of job on Indeed and LinkedIn and job websites and other places that I was researching that role and looking at what do other directors in IT and technology doing this kind of work do. And once I understood that, then I
Mhm.
came up with a summary of I've read now 50 resumes and job descriptions of what the expectations are of a director in IT.
Well, not just
So
expectations. What I heard is that you also, and knowing you, you did some research and starting with the end in mind. What would success, as you said, what would a
what
successful, value added, impactful role and leader look like? And then you translate it back.
and yeah, and I translated it, and it's interesting because the very job description I wrote turned into a roadmap for work, because it was kind of like you're writing your own story
Yeah.
because they didn't have a guideline. So yes, they offered me the job after I did, I sent them what I sent them. They reviewed it. We had 3 interviews with the whole team, and then eventually, what happened was they offered me an offer. And when I got the offer, and I came into my first week of work after onboarding, the most interesting thing about that was I talked to my boss. I said, "So what? Now that I'm here, what do you want me to do?" Because I thought the job description that I wrote for them was just a test on whether you could write. Because some companies will do that. You see what I
Oh,
mean? So I
yes,
thought I thought
yes.
maybe they're testing my
Oh,
ability of whether I can communicate or not.
yes.
And so when I asked my boss, "What do I do?" He said, "Oh, just enjoy yourself." And I said, "You've got to be kidding me. You have got." I kind of alarmed myself in that very first week of, "You're kidding, right? You did you just tell me to enjoy?" And then he smiled at me, and my new boss said, "You're going to enjoy this job. Just take your time, see what the team's doing, and figure it out." And so there was no template. There was no, "Here's what our best practices are. Here's what our rules are. Here's how you do your job." There was, "You figure it out." And that became the most interesting learning curve of my entire career because previously everything was structured. Previously, everything was, "Here is how we do it, and this is what you need to do, and this is how you got to get it done, and this is by when." And all of a sudden, I was in a job that didn't have any of that. It didn't have any structure whatsoever. It just said, "Learn as you go and figure it out." And so I did. I learned economic development by watching other people do economic development and figure out, well, how do you talk to a company and how do you see an opportunity and how do you, take a grant or funding or opportunities and help these companies do what they do to grow their business. And so I had to learn all of these steps in that new job. And it took me 7 or 8 months. So in a brand new job, it took me 7 or 8 months to become somebody who was actually functioning
Yes.
in the role of a director. Prior to that, it was all learning, and I frankly for the first 2 or 3 months didn't know what I was doing. I was like lost. So when people say, well, I don't know if I can do that job or step up to the next level, sometimes the expectation isn't stepping up to the next level. It's testing the ability to learn what you need to learn because
Mm,
you don't know what you don't know. So can you learn? And that's what sometimes somebody is looking for in a leader. Um, and so it's interesting because I did that. And after 9 months in the job, I didn't second guess whether I could do the job because I had felt comfortable with my ability to do the job.
okay,
And
so
that's
Neil, what did you discover? So I before you
okay. Sorry.
before we go into it, because people, I'm curious. I'm sure my audience is curious too. So, what did you discover in these 9 months to get to say what you just said that, okay, I didn't question my abilities anymore. So, tell me more about what came easy. What did you find? What did you find challenging? What did you learn? Yeah, your
So
mindset.
so what came easy was the confidence and the knowledge that I had in the team. So the team I was part of was largely non-technical, and that allowed me to secure my place in that team because I was more technical and was able to shed light on things that they didn't always understand. I could help the team internally grasp
I see.
complicated things that were going on in the IT world without being complicated about it. So that was the value add that I brought to the table. What was hard for me though was to understand the nature of the relationships that an organization and economic development has. So there are political relationships, there are external funding relationships, there are academic relationships, there are business relationships. So there are 4 or 5 different types of audiences that your organization has to connect with, and you need to understand how to convey the value that you bring to the table to each of these different stakeholders. So that was the challenging part. That was the learning curve of how do you how do you speak to different audiences and different leaders in a way where they will actually stop and listen, and how do you also, and this was the biggest lesson actually, and this was something I was very bad at, and I'm still working on it, by the way, even after such a long time. The ability to be present, and I'll say this 3 times, Andrea, um, because I think Generation Z especially needs to hear this because they're distracted, right? So I'm a little bit older, uh, but Gen Zs definitely need to understand this. The ability to be present and listen with intent to the audience that you serve.
Keep going.
And the audience you serve could be a client, they could be a business, they could be a CEO, they could be a family member, it could even be your child. It doesn't matter who the audience is, but you have to listen intentionally and be present to the audience that you serve, because all of your outcomes and the decisions you make and the work that you do will be driven by how well you are able to listen and absorb the pain points and the challenges and the narrative of what that audience is telling you. So this is the most interesting thing in sales that you can ever teach, and they never teach this anywhere in sales. You understand the mechanics of how an opportunity or deal works because you're able to reveal that by what your customer is saying. So your customer is willing to tell you what their problems are because they're looking for solutions. Your customer is willing to reveal to you what your challenges might be, what your pain points are, what they're trying to address, what's a deep concern in their lives. After a conversation flows for a little while and they develop the trust with you,
Hmm.
they're willing to reveal these things to you subtly. But here's the thing, they're not just going to tell you, I have this problem, maybe you can solve it. That's not how it works. They reveal it in conversation and you have to listen for it. And in order to listen for it, you have to be present. And being present is not being on your laptop or not being on your phone, and not being on social media or whatever it may be. Being present is saying, out of the last 15 minutes of listening to the person that I was listening to, I was able to capture two or three things that are important to them. And now I'm going to process that in the next couple of days and then send them an email and say, this is what I heard. Here's something I can do to help. So, this is the biggest lesson that I learned in that initial 9 months of, now my work is not dealing with technology or IT or networks or computers anymore. Now my work is dealing with people. And when I'm dealing with people, the programming of the person is understanding that person, being empathetic to that person. And so leadership to me, and the role of being a director or leader in any capacity, is first the role of developing that understanding, empathy, and being present in that moment to move forward with that person and develop trust.
And
I'll stop there.
well, it's so fascinating because most of us wants to have just one kind of one customer, one relationship that we invest in and we focus on. And when you started talking, you mentioned four. So your learning curve was steeper because you had to do it four times, or one would say it was faster because you had to do it four times and you had the opportunity. So, depending on how we look at it, either way is listening to people who are different, four times different, because we're all different. It's fascinating. It's fascinating what you're saying, and interestingly, as you started talking, I forgot to plug in my computer, so the little battery is low. Plug me in, turned in, and I found myself, oh, I wasn't present as you were talking about being present. And I myself had to practice, okay, how do I pull myself back into being present? And I also think that that is also part of what you're talking about, that we can't just say to be present. We have to practice that listening. How do we come back to being present when something shows up, a thought, a warning on our computer, a phone, buzzing, an email showing up, and uh, and then master that. So
I hope you
great
plugged
point.
it. I hope
I
you plugged.
Of course we're plugged in. It's all good.
Good.
It's all
Very good.
good. I wanted to be vulnerable and
There you go.
transparent, and it
But it's you're 100% right. It's such an important lesson that is often overlooked and not taught in any sales book. It's not taught in any promotional course or college or university course. Sales, to me, is the ability to build trust in the modern economy. Because the issue is, or the problem statement for every single company right now, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, the problem statement is the same for your sales team, is how do I get the deal? How do I break the ice, gain the customer's trust, and lead to an opportunity closing for my business, right? Or for the work that I do. And then salespeople are measured on that. But here's the other problem that we have, which frankly didn't exist 50 or 60 years ago. Now, because the world is digital, people are saturated, literally saturated with noise from companies, and noises LinkedIn, social media, YouTube, television ads, direct emails, newsletters, companies just doing cold marketing using CRMs and HubSpot and MailChimp and all these things. So the interesting thing about that is if you're a leader sitting at any company trying to figure out what am I going to invest in that's going to help my company do well,
Mm,
right?
that's a good
That's the big,
question.
biggest question for
Mm,
all leaders is
yeah,
what do I invest in that helps my company do well? Is
yeah.
it people? Is it technology? What is it? And then as a leader, you're being bombarded by 1,000 emails a day, and 80% of those emails are junk. Imagine this problem to have, right? So I'm sitting at let's say I'm sitting at a Fortune 500 company and
Yep.
I get 1,000 emails from startups and other companies around the world every day. And I'm a CTO or something like that. Now I'm going to ignore everything, right? I'm not going to read any of them if they're salesy emails. If it's somebody I don't know, if it's somebody I don't trust, if it's a company I've never heard of, if it goes in my junk or spam, if it's an unsolicited email,
Yeah.
I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to open that file or click on that link or do anything. I'm going to ignore it and delete it, and that's that. And it's the same on LinkedIn. I get so many on LinkedIn actually, where I'll get messages from random companies saying we can help fix your sales pipeline, and it's like, no, you can't. And I the reason I say it, I don't say it to them. I say it in my mind. No, you can never help me address my sales pipeline. And the reason I say that is because sales in the modern economy is based on trust. So if you're in business development, if you're a director in business development or sales, or if you're in that executive role, your job is not to sell a contract to another company or person. Your job is to develop cadence with that person, to develop trust with that person, to give them a reason to like you and then work with you where they get the outcome or the benefit that they're looking for. So sales is not, I'm doing this for my company, which is what 90% of salespeople do. Sales is, what am I doing for you? What is the value I'm adding to your life today? Is it me talking to you about selling you a product or a service that could solve a problem for your business? That's one road to go on. Or is it me spending an hour with you on a lunch listening about the issues that you may be having with your child or your family member or your parent?
Yeah.
And when people say that, people say, well, why would you talk about personal things like that if you're in a sales meeting? You would be surprised how many people are just looking for someone to listen.
Well, that's where you just use why would you talk to someone, but it's about listening. So it's not about talking, it's about listening. So
It's about,
already there's yes. Neil,
yeah,
what I am interested in, I'm 100% trust in that. I'm interested in because I believe first I have to build trust with myself in order to build trust with someone else. And you said something that really, sparked my curiosity that it took you 9 months to be confident and what I'm confident in yourself in that role. So what I'm hearing is 9 months to build that trust in yourself. So what had what did you have to to change in your mindset to create that trust with yourself during that time?
the feeling or what I had to change in myself was not feeling like an imposter. So imposter syndrome, where you are in a role
And how
that
did you do
you
that?
so that's where learning plays a big part. Not being an imposter in any job is the ability to learn and adapt and absorb the work. And this is where you have to put in the effort to change yourself. You change the way you work, your mindset, what you have to do every single day. You change your habits essentially to map your opportunity. And when you realize
I like that.
that, so when you realize that it works, then you get momentum and then you build confidence. So I walked into that role as a director in a completely different industry that I didn't know anything about as an imposter. But within that 9 months, I learned how not to be an imposter. I learned this is how the system works. These are their best practices. This is how they engage their different audiences. This is how you communicate their value proposition. And so being able to learn these lessons in that journey of 8 to 9 months before being productive allowed me to then say, okay, I can now build a system in my mind of how to do this work. And once I got to that point, I was no longer an imposter.
Yeah.
I was trusting in myself and my research and my ability to do the job. And if I could trust that I could do the job, then I could trust that I could succeed at the job. Because you can't run before you walk. You have to learn to walk before you run. So that's what I was doing. I was learning to walk. And once I felt stable and could walk properly in that role, then I started to run. And when I started to run, then the results started happening and you start to feel success.
You know
Um,
what I'm hearing, Neil? That you actually turned this concept of the imposter syndrome on its head. You used it as how I tell my clients how to use fear is a warning sign. It's a sign of. So what I'm hearing is you turned it upside down and said, okay, well, I feel imposter, like almost like great. Now I'm gonna do something about it because this is a sign of I can't run yet. But what I'm also hearing, Neil, is that you had the trust and the confidence to start with and acknowledging the awareness of, but I know how to walk. So I understand there's a gap between walking and running, but I know how to walk. So I'll start with what I know. I have confidence and trust in myself in walking. And then I'll put the effort into to learn, to continue to learn while I walk. So it's that paradox of you're not stuck, you're not paralyzed, you still make progress, though you're in this wilderness zone of I don't know what I'm doing. But what you know is that you are learning and there is very gradual progress. And I love that. Thank you for sharing.
and the most interesting part of that, and I will mention it because it's really important. I think in the modern world, especially in the last 15 years, we have heard from coaches and motivational experts and people in that field. And books and recordings like The Secret and all these different things that are out there. Anthony Robbins and all of these, different motivational experts around the world that consider themselves thought leaders. They always talk about, well, you manifest your outcomes, right? You manifest your success. So when you look at literature like The Secret, for example,
Hmm.
which millions of people around the world believe religiously in this, right?
Yep.
The books and the what they tell you is, well, and they're endorsed by celebrities as well, and they're kind of like, you manifest your success, you manifest this, you manifest that. I would like to completely argue against that today to your audience, completely anti manifestation. You do not manifest your outcomes. There is something else you do, and it begins with the same three letters. You manufacture your outcomes because manifesting is dreaming, manufacturing is creating. Manufacturing is action. Manufacturing is get it done and do it now. Manifesting is dreaming about what may never come.
Well, this is where I say, and where I relate that I use the word re-engineering. So re-engineering, engineering, manufacturing is, yeah,
Yeah,
you create what you want.
exactly. And that's what, when somebody says, well, what does success look like? Um, you have to manufacture that success through your actions, and your actions are, you learn, you listen, and then you take steps to do what you need to do in order to become good at whatever the requirement of that role is. So when we talk about directorship, the very word director in its title means directing, means instructing, it means actioning something.
Yes.
So you cannot be a director unless you're willing to take action. And manufacturing is the art of taking action in whatever it is you're doing, whereas manifesting is the art of dreaming of or setting goals. So a lot of people set goals. A lot of people set goals. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then they never achieve the goals. And then all the coaches take advantage of that. So every single personal coach I've ever heard in my entire life is, well, I'm hearing that pain point and that problem, and I'm going to leverage that and tell you what you need to hear. Now, the problem with coaches telling us what we need to hear is I don't want to pay a coach who tells me what I already know. I'm not saying I'm smarter than them. I'm just saying I don't need to hear it from you because I already know what I'm not doing. And that's the pivot. That's the tipping point in everybody's life. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, don't expect the results. Start manufacturing your results. If you need to lose weight, go to the gym. If you need to get better in your work, learn,
Yeah.
get a mentor, train yourself in what you need to get done, take action. You have 24 hours in the day, don't sleep for 16. And that's the point, because people say, well, Neil, you've still got a normal job and a normal paycheck, and your life is pretty normal. Yes, I am not a big celebrity, I'm not the wealthiest person in the world, but I can tell you what makes somebody into that, because I'm learning that myself. And it's not about chasing money, it's about understanding the journey that you're on that takes you to where you need to be. And that is both a spiritual journey and a personal journey and a professional journey. So the spiritual journey is having the trust that the universe, and if you believe in faith and if you believe in God, having the trust that the universe will take you where you need to go and that God will lead you where you need to go. That's the faithful or spiritual journey for most people. You need to invest into that. 50% of your energy needs to invest into that spiritual journey so that you understand that you're going to land where you need to land, even if you're going through pain and difficulty and challenges, because we all go through pain and difficulty and challenges. It's not the challenge or the pain itself that hurts, it's how you handle it,
How you respond to it. Yes.
how you respond to it. So people are in reaction, not in prediction. We are constantly living in reaction and response. And so, if we are constantly living in reaction and response, we must learn how to react to a situation to develop the outcomes that we want from that circumstance. Because it doesn't matter how bad of a day you're having, sometimes, if you change your response to that day, one thing might happen that makes it better. So it's not what's happening, it's how you respond to it that matters. So, yeah.
And on that note, I want to say, well, I want to say so many things, to be honest, but where I'm looking at the time, and I wanna I wanna honor your time too and my audience's time. So manufacture what you want. I'll close with that. What I heard from you. Be present with the people that you're with and lean into not knowing and learning. It will take time. It will take 6, 9 months, maybe 12 months. Lean into and use your imposter syndrome as a sign to take action. So, on that note, Neil, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it.
I hope you and your audience listening to this gets a lot out of this today.
And Neil, if they want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Um, you're welcome to share my LinkedIn with people in your audience.
All right.
I have a website. It's just my name, Neil Neil Singh Singh.co.
All right.
There's an email and a Zoom link on that website. If they want to book time with me or if they want to email me, they can go to the website and directly reach me. So it's neilsingh.co. Very easy to remember. I'm happy to send it to you in LinkedIn if you want to share that with your audience.
Yes, I'll put it in the notes. Great.
Yep.
Well, thank you again. And until next time, keep being present and keep listening.
Thank you.